Without further ado, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Jewel to do genocide acknowledgement.
Okay. Hamataki api chante washteya na pe chuzapi iyushkia wanchi yankapi. Hello, my relatives. I greet you all with a good heart, a handshake with a good heart. My name is Jewel Arcord, and I am a Dakota in Lakota. I wrote for the Sissetuan band up in South Dakota, but grew up here in Minnesota. Minnesota, we call it. So, as Monse said, many of our conversations have centered around, being asked to do land acknowledgements, and I have come back with I would like to highlight the genocide that has happened here in the Americas. That's not acknowledged. America has not gotten to that first layer. So when we talk about land acknowledgements, I'm glad that many of these institutions are getting to that point where they can acknowledge they're on stolen land. But also, when we do these land acknowledgements, in my opinion, it's like the perpetrator raping you or harming you, and then coming back and saying, now I want you to acknowledge that, I raped you. And those are what land acknowledgements are like to me, from my perspective. Not everybody in the Indigenous community might hold that same view, but I am adamant about America, Minnesota, our communities, our neighborhoods need to acknowledge that a genocide has happened here in the Americas with our Indigenous people, and the harm that has brought to all of our communities. And I've done a lot of research on intergenerational historical trauma as it stands. And if there's victims, there's perpetrators, and perpetrators too carry intergenerational historical trauma. And, at some point we may go into that, but right now we're talking about homeless in our homeland. And I think that is the theme. I wanted to acknowledge Jermaine and Tanya. Tanya Fitzgerald was one of my son's housing workers, social, kind of in that social perspective. And so they both have so much to say. And because this is a second chance audience, I wanted to tell my son's story, which is why I'm here today. And sometime we had moved him back to Minnesota because he had gotten very sick, and he had been through a surgery, and the wound vac sponge was left in him, and it stayed in there for 18 months, and it caused a bone infection. And we ended up bringing him back to Minnesota, and we couldn't find housing for him. So I'd be kind of keeping him undercover on my leases, or we would house him in hotels, which was quite expensive. And I don't know if I can share. Can I share this video now a little bit?
Yeah.
Is that okay? Okay, let's see if I can do it. Desktop. Let's see, maybe. I'll see if I can do it. Let's see. Should be open. Not sure. Okay, maybe not. Oh, that's right here. Let's see. I think I have to open it up, huh? Okay, and then is this? Okay. Okay, never mind. Okay, sorry. I'm going to try to go back to the. Where's my Zoom? Okay, here we are. Here we are. Let's see if I can share. If not, I can paraphrase what he said. Open. Oh, I don't think it's going to let me do it. Where's my desktop? That's not this. Okay, I'm going to paraphrase just for the time. So he had said he was up for housing in Scott County, and the place had, and granted, my son is in a wheelchair, he's disabled. And we found out that the place had gone to a pedophile with a worse criminal record than Henry. And Henry had a drug and gun charge on his criminal history. But he had served that time, and then he was not able to successfully re-enter, even though he was paralyzed and had tons of health issues. He could not get into the, you could not get into housing. So when we found that out, that this place went to a person with a worse, record than Henry, and also a pedophile in Scott County, it took me about 6 months to connect some dots there. In that, I remember from statistics classes that 83, somewhere in the high 80s, mid to high 80s, or 2/3, you might say, of sex offenders were white males. And I also knew that drug and gun charges were predominantly assigned or, arrested and charged to men of color, BIPOC men of color, Indigenous, Black, Hispanic. And so BIPOC communities were charged with gun and drug, even though, I did a lot of looking up statistics. And so I started coming to the conclusion of who's getting housed in Minnesota. Now, my son could get housed in Wisconsin. So, and I also looked up, I went all the way back to the 1700s and seen who in the legislature, Senate, government had gotten charged with sex crimes or had, offenses on their records, sex offenses. There's quite a few. So somebody up there is making these legislative laws that allows sex offenders to be housed. They also, because they're white, they're more likely to know people who own houses or, can then rent to them without going through these public, public service agencies, Section 8, HUD, or whatever they might call them, where you get a reduced rent. So they're getting housed. And even though this place that Henry was up for is probably a rent-based place, he wasn't able to get housed. I'm grateful that Tanya was able to finally get us into housing, and Henry has now since passed in July. So we were able to, take care of him in a place because he didn't want to die in the hospital. But that's really some of the reason why I'm here, is to create awareness about who is getting housed in Minnesota. And I wish I could show his video, because he talks about, here he is, we are Native Americans, we're American Indians, and we can't get housed in our homeland. And why are we homeless? And we've served our time, genocide has happened to us, but we can't get housed if you have a record, if you're disabled, and how hard that makes it on the family. I could have them stay with me for so long, and then my management would come at me, and we'd have to move them into hotels, and it was a constant shift. And as he says in the video, how that's one of your first basic, sustainability foundations of, Maslow's, pyramid. You got to have housing, you got to have safety, you got to feel, you had to have a roof over your head in order to keep moving forward in this whole re-entry. But if you're stopped right from the get-go, I mean, how do we expect the revolving door to not stop? You know what I'm saying? So I don't know. I think that those are one of my, so that's why I'm here, to create some awareness around who is getting housed in Minnesota, who's not getting housed, and does it have to do with laws in legislature and creating awareness around these types of offenses, charges, and how do we begin to level that playing field, I think is some of my points here. I'll keep trying to see if I can get Henry's video to show. I know some of his former doctors are here, and a lot of folks got to know Henry and his journey and the plight of trying to find housing. It was very, very challenging, to say the least. Again, I found a lot about housing. There's a point system I never knew about. Tanya probably will talk a little bit about that, but I think those are my initial points. I kind of would, I would like to share the screen time with Jermaine or Tanya if you want to kind of talk about your experience. But That's, and we can kind of bounce off each other if you want, ask questions, but. Okay, yep.
Thank you for highlighting that, and sorry to hear about your son's passing. And I appreciate you being here in a way that's able to honor his memory and also his trials and tribulations, because there's still a Henry out there. You know, there's still a Henry going through the same problems. There's still a Henry who cannot get housed, you know, based on a number of things, you know, criminal record, systemic racism, who has connections, who doesn't. All of that's very valid. And I just appreciate you being able to uplift that memory and honor him through that way. If you don't mind, Tanya, I'm going to switch it over to you, because as I understand, you were the housing coordinator, or fill in the blank on the title, because I don't know the exact title, but you actually helped Henry to get housing. So if you could just talk to us and walk us through those experiences from meeting Henry, the trials, the tribulations, and then eventually the success. Please do so in your own narrative. And thank you for being here today, Tanya.
All right, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Tanya Fitzgerald, and I started a home healthcare business. So originally started just helping people live independently, and that's helping them read mail. I am contracted through the state, and so the company is Fitzgerald Home Healthcare, LLC. So that's how Henry and I first connected, with me just helping him. And Henry's number one goal was find housing, find me something that where I can live. And so I actually started looking for housing even before I started the housing business. So it took us 23 months to find Henry affordable housing. And just, I learned so much information by working for Henry. That's actually why I started the business. So I will contribute my business to Henry. We actually in the office have Henry's Housing Wall of Fame, all the names of the clients that we have since found housing for is on Henry's wall next to his blanket that just reminds me every time I go in the office, the struggle that we had. So with 23 months, you can imagine, I'm telling you, every leaf was overturned, every lead, every time a lead came about, I was there, we were looking for it. Henry said no to group homes, no to sharing with, you know, a roommate. He wanted to live independently. And as an individual, you have that choice. If you want to live with someone or if you want your own housing, you have that choice. And so I worked the hardest for Henry because he would turn down everything that wasn't independent. There were some times we got close, things like that, and it didn't, you know, go through, and then we would just go back, start over again. Some of the committees I joined was so that I could learn what is it that I don't know that's out there. And I'm like, okay, I've got to find some other leads. So through talking to people, just always on the hunt for information, just keep looking, keep looking. And even now I will tell my staff, there's always that golden nugget is there. If I could find it for Henry, it's there. But you have to keep that perseverance. To me, there's always hope. I was in the shower a couple weeks ago and I thought about housing, hope equals housing for every client. So I'm getting ready to put that on the wall at the office because that gives me that hope, reassurance that if we keep looking, keep pressing, keep persevering, we're going to be able to find that housing. The family, and I just think about the way this, I mean, Henry lived for 5 months in the townhome, and it's actually a 4-bedroom townhome that's wheelchair accessible. So to go from having nothing to this, I mean, I was even shocked when we were able to get this. I will say its relationship with managers and things like that if you have those relationships and they know you're there supporting people, we always try to make sure when we sign leases, we go with people, we meet with property managers, we support them, and we're with the client all along the way. This service is actually open to anyone that's 18 that has medical assistance, and there are housing companies just about at least all over the metro area. It may not be all over Minnesota, but the metro area has them. So if you know people who are looking for housing, the help is there. The health insurance actually pays for this service. So once the person gets qualified and the state says yes, then you just start looking. And I'm the type of person, I'm not going to give up. Henry never gave up. And I'll tell you, as much as I wanted to offer him, okay, we found a group home in Brooklyn Park. He was like, nope, I don't want it. We actually went and looked at a couple places and he was like, nope, I don't want it. And I'm like, come on, Henry, this is a great opportunity. And he would tell me, no, I don't want that. And so honoring his request, it just kept me pushing and pushing and pushing. And then this opportunity came about. And so we were all excited to have this opportunity for Henry. So I'm just thankful we were able to help Henry. And the same zeal I have for Henry is the same zeal that I try to impart on the staff to have that for other people. I actually won't turn any clients away, even if they have, offenses and things like that. There may be challenges. It might be difficult, but still, even with Henry, we still found him something. Yes, it took 23 months, but we were still able to find him something. And then, of course, I was just there. All right, Henry, don't get in any trouble. Don't get in any trouble. I would meet with him weekly, or, at least we would talk on the phone. So just trying to keep him so that, nothing else came about other than what was there. So then we wouldn't have any new challenges that we had to jump over because there were new hurdles or anything like that. But we all know that the criminal background is definitely a barrier. So even if you serve your time, it's still there. And even with the programs that's affordable housing, the rules are really strict. So you have a felony, it might still take you 7 or 10 years to still get housing. And honestly, 7 or 10 years is a long time. And as Jewel mentioned, without that stable housing, how can you really expect someone to really be effective at raising their children, making sure the kids get to school, things like that? All of that comes into play. Not getting back into trouble, not being depressed if there's some issues and things like that. If you have some mental health, all the paperwork that was involved in trying to do this. There is a program that's out there now. It's called Beyond Backgrounds. We've used that when Henry was, when we originally had him in the program, they've revamped it this year. So I would suggest, if people are looking for housing, things like that, Beyond Backgrounds, it's a $300 fee, but it will offer some type of insurance to help. But every program I found about, we had Henry in that program trying to help him because we knew that the challenges were there. The state has since changed some of the protocol. So now they know that, usually you get about 150 hours to look for housing for a client. The program is Housing Stabilization Services. And with those 150 hours, you can look for housing. Also, if there's some barriers in the background, things like that, you're also able to get another 150 hours. So that will, give you 300 hours within that year. And then the program is renewed. So it can be renewed as often, as the person is needing that help. So I just, excited that we found Henry. I wish we would have had him a little bit longer so that he would have had, the housing for at least a year. But I'm still thankful that, he was at home versus in a hospital.
Thank you kindly for sharing all that you shared. And I wish I was more prepared with statistics, but there is data to support that people who have experienced long-term homelessness or housing insecurities and the relationship to passing away shortly after becoming housed. It's just something that we really need to explore and to take into consideration when we are dealing with people, because we can't lose the fact that, you know, humanity is a part of us all. No matter our offense, no matter our mistake, no matter our, you know, biggest crime, we're still people at the end of the day, and we deserve to be treated as people with love, with care, with respect, and with proper resources to be able to navigate whatever it is that's coming next for us. As you detailed the story, I can only imagine that there is a paperwork trail left behind to get into all of these places. Can you tell us a little bit more about that? Can you tell us about the paperwork or any other of the behind the scenes efforts that you had to deal with? Because being the coordinator of all of this, I imagine that. And I also want to know, have you experienced any outright stigma or any discrimination based on your contacts with trying to secure housing for Henry?
You know, I'll start with you don't really, so with the racism, you know, it's hard to know. Things are so secret and hush hush. You don't really know who's there. Now, the example we know from the pedophile and the housing stuff, we know that because we were trying to figure out how come Henry didn't get this. And so we were able to find that information out from an inside source that was able to tell us that somebody else was able to get the place that we were trying to also go for. So usually, like, they'll have wait lists and things like that. Property managers will have wait lists. And so you don't really know where your name is on the list. So how do you know your name isn't being jumped over? I know most recently we've been taking screenshots of clients to see where they are on the list, if the list is public. And then we've had one client name keep going down the list. And we're trying to figure out, well, how come this person's name keep going down the list instead of higher up on the list? Well, the property manager told us we shouldn't be able to see the list. So why is it a secret list that's there? How come we're not able to see that, you know, with all the properties? Then we would really know where our client is. We've asked property managers to update their list because we know for a fact we've had clients on this same list that actually got housing somewhere else. So how is it that this client can be number 11 when we know 2 of the people on that list went to housing somewhere else? So then we've asked them to update the list so that at least we know if our client is moving up the list. The other question, the paperwork, I mean, the paperwork, if you don't know how to navigate the system, there's no way that you're going to ever get housing because you don't know how to navigate the system. Information is not readily available unless you have someone. I mean, like I said, all the information that I learned, I didn't know about Beyond Backgrounds program. I didn't learn about that until somebody mentioned that because, like I said, I joined some committees to make sure I was able to find out, is there something else I'm going to learn about that I don't know? And we all know you just don't know what you don't know until somebody tells you about it. Then it's like, oh, well, I didn't know that. Because Henry was registered in Scott County when I first started working with him, that's how we was able to continue working through Scott County. And, you know, the amount of money, so there are definitions for homelessness that are like HUD definitions, different definitions. So if you're not homeless for, you know, first of all, if you're paying for hotels yourself and you're couch hopping, you're not considered homeless, of which you're trying to figure out, how does that make sense? You know, if you're paying out of your Social Security money, we know that you can't afford to live in a hotel for like months at a time off of Social Security. It's just not enough money. So then you have to go couch hop in between that. I remember the documentation where they wanted us to go back 3 years to document the homelessness. And I'm like, seriously, 3 years? Do you think somebody is going to remember every hotel they stayed at, who they couch top with? But that was one of the requirements. So we had to do that. So then we try to piece it together. And, working with Henry, I would say, all right, we would tackle some, maybe Tuesday. I would come back Thursday and say, okay, let's tackle this again. Let's keep trying to work back. So then actually, going forward, I started keeping the list. So then I knew, okay, so because the county had been paying some of course, there's not shelters in every county. Some counties have shelters, some counties don't have shelters. Scott County does not have a shelter, and they're probably not going to have a shelter because that's not the way Scott County wants to do things. So there's some money sometimes available for hotel vouchers. That's not long-term. Those are short-term things because the money runs out to pay for those vouchers. So if the money is out, then they don't have the vouchers to give to people. So then you're telling people, even now, my clients that might be homeless, I would recommend, you may have to pay for a hotel a couple of days. You're probably going to have to couch hop with some friends. You might have to go to the shelter in Minneapolis. We just don't, my company and other companies that I represent, we don't do the crisis. We just don't have anything that we can do for crisis. Our goal is long-term, and we're trying to help you find something long-term versus that quick fix.
Sorry, didn't mean to cut you off, but I want to acknowledge that you're mentioning the systemic and academic approaches to being able to have to hop through hoops to be able to get something such as housing. But a lot of us minorities, Black, Indigenous, and people of color come from places with low education where information doesn't reach us. Healthcare isn't accessible. There's so many adversities already in place that we don't know what this paper says. It looks like a bunch of words, let alone how to take the steps. And so if somebody didn't have someone like you, which a lot of people that I know do not, then they're just even further off, left behind. I do want to tie this back to homeless in our homeland. And I do want to raise the point that we are not only talking about Henry, but we're also highlighting the disparities that exist for Native and Indigenous people of the Americas. And when we think of it in that context, we're talking Minnesota is a makeup of 1% of Indigenous or Native American people, but they're 10% of the prison population. They are 10 times more likely to experience death from overdose than their white counterparts. They lead persons with diabetes. The disparities, if you go by the number, it's the Native American tend to experience the highest disparities here. And when we think about homeless in our homeland, when we think about genocide, and when we think about 1% of people, my wonder to the world is how can we not find a systemic approach and a person-centered approach to be able to help out 1% of the population? And it doesn't make sense to me at all. I appreciate this time and this opportunity to be able to lift up this cause. I myself am not Native American, but I can't put on a presentation without mentioning some of those statistics that I just mentioned, because if you're for people, you want to help all people, not just one person or not just one kind of people. And that's where Jewel, that's where Jermaine, that's where Tanya, we want to help each other, but we have to really address where the fire is to be put out. And it is within the Native American communities who experience the highest disparities. So yes, do you want to come up here? I want to remind everybody. Yeah, yep. I want to remind everybody that this is interactive. Amy is sitting down to join us. She's also part of our training committee here as well. Tanya, I can get to you right after this.
Okay.
I'm Native American too, actually, and what I found, I dealt with chronic homelessness because of my felony, and I never got no help, like chronic. I was in like shelters with my kids, like for years and years, like since I've been out of prison in '04. So, but now, finally I had to get it myself, but people don't know that information. Like with the felony that I have, I qualify for no housing. So it was always like struggle, 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 struggle. So I just, that something has to be done to like help people with felonies that just cannot get housing.
I wonder if Jermaine wants to say anything.
Tanya, did you want to follow up on your comment? Then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Jermaine so he can detail his experiences.
Oh, I think Mary had a question.
Yeah, well, no, I wanted to make a comment related to what you were saying, Tanya, but also the statistics and all that. I work with people who are deaf and hard of hearing. And actually, I work with a man who's Native American and has a housing issue. So I help find employment, but I can refer to other agencies because he's homeless, couch hopping like that. And he was number one. He's now number one on a list. So I called to follow up about it, that he's been on for quite a while. And she's like, well, yeah, but there's a person. So, facilities that have apartments, assisted living, nursing care. So there was a person internal that wanted an apartment. So then she bumps up ahead on the list.
See?
And I'm like, oh, you have to be kidding me. And kind of like this, this person, because of his hearing loss, but also education level, would not be able to navigate all of this on his own. And I guess it really hit me when you're saying 1% of the population, but 10% incarcerated or all of that. And anyhow, so I just wanted to throw that out about what happened on the waiting list for him. So we're going to try to get him on a lot of waiting lists.
Thank you. Tanya, did you want to follow through with your comment?
And in the chat box, I'm going to just list the housing stabilization services. And, the state has this program for us to help people. I will also list my phone number and email address. Like I said, we take everybody because there's hope for everybody. So we just want to make sure we can help people. It's self-fulfillment when you are helping people that sometimes they get looked over or they're not capable, of doing all the reading all the stuff, but you can still help them. And even after you help them get housing, we still will walk alongside you, checking in, making sure rent is paid, making sure we are that liaison between management, property managers, so that we can reduce, you ever being homeless again, because really that's the goal. Once you find that housing, the goal is never to be homeless again. And so we want to have success stories because we know as people are housed, then, things that they're out there doing will be reduced so that they can be successful in life. And that's the goal, is for everybody to be successful in life. So I'm just grateful. I'm grateful we can find housing for everybody.
And thank you for your person-centered approaches, and thank you for your culturally appropriate approaches, because being able to communicate, build relationships, stay connected to people, those are the portions that often get left out of the way that the system operates. And so I appreciate that. Before I turn it over to Jermaine, we've heard a lot about Henry. I want to be able to take this time to work through this technical aspect of connecting the video to the screen. So if you'll just give me 1 second, I just want to be able to, yes.
I just wanted to say while Monses is trying to get that video up, I always remember Jermaine saying how the stereotypes that exist out there with our BIPOC communities, sometimes it's like you need a person like Tanya to be that voice for you. Because sometimes we don't have the words, or we can't articulate ourselves, and let alone navigate the paperwork. And so I remember Jermaine saying, you almost need somebody to be that face, that person to present to these housing folks, and Tanya talked about having that relationship. But sometimes folks that are coming are out of the system, prison systems, aren't even allowed to get that far. They're just, because the stereotypes are so deeply embedded in our amygdalas, which happen way, way, way early in early childhood, we develop stereotypes and triggers. And so when these folks who many times are not from our BIPOC communities, these management housing resources, and that housing resource list they give out doesn't work. You can't get housing on that. It's real hard. But I think that, that piece about having, and not everybody's able to have a person like Henry did. And we've had several, you'll hear from Henry, had several housing folks. And it really puts the burden on me. I'm raising grandkids. I'm, working a full-time job. I'm a director. And that massive amount of paperwork, I would look at it like, what? We got to fill that out just to apply for that housing. It's just ridiculous how challenging this system makes it to get your basic need, housing, for sure. So I just wanted to kind of throw that in there before we get to that. And Jermaine and, mute, okay. Yeah.
And thank you for that introduction into the video and sharing everything that you have. We've heard a lot about Henry. We're going to put a face to Henry right now.
In my homeland. My name's Henry Thin Elk. I'm Dakota in Lakota. I'm from Rosebud Reservation, but I'm born and raised in Minneapolis, South Minneapolis, East Phillips neighborhood. Minneapolis got the largest Native American community for being Minneapolis. So everybody knows everybody. It's like almost like a reservation, but not, just family knows everybody. Being a minority is difficult, like it's hard, but you gotta navigate through it. It's pretty hard. Like my whole life, it's been a struggle being Native American. And I'm proud to be Native American. Like, my family is different than most families. I got shot by my cousin, like my first cousin. Difficult. My whole life. I love my family though. Like, that's all you got at the end of it. I'm like, when I was a single parent, there was nobody to tell me no, don't do that. You know what I'm saying? I didn't have a dad. He's in and out of the picture, so I gravitated towards the streets. Like, I ain't nothing else to do. And that led to a prison cell. I did all of that, like, and I'm in a wheelchair on top of it in prison. I got shot by my cousin, still around. Like, I can't go to certain family events because I don't want to bump heads, It's just different for me. I love my family though. All my aunties and uncles, even though a whole bunch of nephews, actually, everybody called me uncle. I'm like a neighborhood uncle. Motherfuckers call me uncle. What up, uncle? Oh, it's been a challenge. Definitely. Homelessness is the main thing. Being homeless, not having a stable place to live, is like one of the basic foundations of moving forward. sleeping in hotels and I was having to check out, never having the structure of having my own house, you know, where I get to lock the door and I get to come and go, you know. It's not, I never had that. Never. I mean, I had it in Wisconsin, but when I come over here, it's impossible. I can go through the paper in Wisconsin and get a house. Call, okay, come pay the lease. You know, I've done it before. Like, it is Minnesota because I'm from here. I don't want to live in Wisconsin. I'm not from Wisconsin. My people's been here for eons, centuries, and I can't get housing here. Come on, man. I should be first in line. I don't want to live like that, but I have to live like that. There's no other way. I don't see no other way. Like, especially when you're going from hotel to hotel. Like, yeah, take that chance. Somebody imagining this starting this my own business, move forward, get funding, get everything going, start my wheelchair company, help people out. I like making people happy. Like, our business would be customizing wheelchairs. And it'd be special because it'd be one-on-one. You know, they nobody else would have a wheelchair like that. New back, everything, like new clothes, everything, like all custom fabric, everything. And have them done by me, you know. Put my signature on it, stamp it down, and one-on-one, like customized. You'll never have a wheelchair like that again. It's gonna be around. That's what I want to be around for a long time, you know. Help people, and I can't even get a house, you know. There's hotels. It's I'm going to hotel to hotel to hotel. I'm paying out of pocket. Like, yeah, they got vouchers and stuff like that, but I can't apply for none of them. I got a background, so been to the Beyond Background program. I did a lot of work with my probation officer. Try to move forward. It's not helping. Just housing. The system isn't built for Native Americans or people of color at all. Like, that's what it is. Who's getting these houses? Like, why am I signed up? I had a housing agent for like 2 years, 3 years now. Over that. And I still can't get housing. It's the fact that I have a drug case and a gun case. Like, I've been shot though. It's a challenge, like you said. I gotta really invest, you know, like that's when I feel comfortable. No, I know I'll be okay. It's gonna be around. That's what I want to be around for a long time. You know? Help people. Help people. Help people. Help people.
I just want to say, wow, you know, like to talk about somebody is one thing, but to be able to hear them and their narrative, I heard his heart, I heard his dreams, and I also heard his struggle. And just thank you for being able to share that with us today, which makes that part of the struggle just even more real. It brings it to life. I mean, he mentioned a person who has the heart to help people, but yet can't get housed himself, you know, and like that's just heartbreaking in and of itself, you know. Is there anything that you want to say?
I'm here really just to, create awareness around homeless in our homeland. And also who is getting housed? Who's getting housed? It's not our people of color per se. They have to jump through all of these hoops. And I did my own bit of research. There's like 41 pedophiles living in my neighborhood. They're getting housed. How does that happen? You know, so I guess I'm looking, you know, second chance, background checks, whoever's out there doing housing, our healthcare folks, whoever's out there. Yeah, there's something at the top up here. There's some laws up here at the top that is impacting us all the way down here. And that's what has to change. I mean, obviously, we've been doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, filling out incredible amounts of paperwork, and we're doing all the work, you know? We've served our time, but we can't re-enter into society and to get a housing, to start building our lives again. You know what I'm saying? And that's really what part of the reason I'm here is, you know, so many of our people have PTSD. Henry had PTSD. And so it was another piece of the whole picture of Henry, you know, with being in a wheelchair, having to have this bone infection that took his below the knees and all these healthcare issues, but still couldn't get housed until 5 months. Imagine if we had him housed before. I mean, how much further, maybe he wouldn't have had to die, but, you know, I just, again, want to create the awareness around, there's something at the top, our legislative, who's making these bills, who's passing these laws and makes it okay for someone with a sex offense. How are they, or an arson charge, they can get housed before somebody with it, who says that a pedophile isn't more dangerous than somebody with a drug or a gun charge? You know, and who's going to start, who's the voice, who's making those, you know, comparison or looking at those types of statistics, you know, like how, because otherwise we're spinning our wheels as communities of color, you know, how do we make a change?
The more violent your felony, the less you're like to get housing.
Yeah.
More violent.
And Henry's, we're pretty minimum. I'm telling you. Oh, okay, yep.
Thank you for that, Jewel. And one of our guest speakers is also Jermaine Barney. And I know for me culturally, and a lot of people of color, we storytell. We receive information and we pass on information via storytelling. And so I want to turn over this time to Jermaine, just to be able to share your story, your experiences, whatever you feel comfortable with sharing. You're in a place to do that. And without further ado, I'm just going to pass this over to Jermaine. If you want to introduce yourself. And
thank you, my sis. My name is Jermaine Barney. I'm an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa. I grew up in South Minneapolis. As far as my experiences with reentry and I'd say barriers, I feel like I have barriers for myself based on being indigenous. You know, I feel there's a you know, Auntie Jewel kind of said it when she, you know, we talked about this in the past, it's almost like you need a surrogate because immediately you're being judged, or at least it feels like that. You know, you hear a tone of voice that's kind of standoffish and kind of like in one ear and out the other, like you're not being heard. It feels like that when it comes to being housed or trying to find housing. Personally, like I've never even tried to go through any programs just because of that. Like I just kind of grew up knowing that those programs are for me, but they're not for me. You know what I mean? It's like I'm better off trying to rent a room from a family member than I am trying to rent my own place. You know, at least I won't be judged based on something I've done in my past. You know, getting out of the judicial system, coming out of prison, it's like, it's kind of hard to find those programs or those people that'll help you. Like, I don't, it's not, it doesn't seem like all the information is readily available. Unless you have somebody helping you trying to find those resources, you just don't know what they are. So you feel like you have none. And like with my brother Henry, like, man, just hearing, like I had no idea about housing point systems and stuff like that. I thought that was only a sentencing guideline. I thought that was the point system. I had no idea that there's a point system involved with being in housing. And like when we were talking about in the beginning, bring awareness to genocide. That's the knowledge of, for me, having the knowledge that there was a genocide committed against my ancestors weighs heavily on my heart. Like I really never knew how much pain that gave me and how much of that pain manifested as anger and really formed my decision-making because I had this pain that manifested as anger. I really had my middle finger up to the system my whole life. You know, that turned into a criminal record. And, you know, I've never had a state ID in my life. I'll only get a tribal ID just for that one reason. You know what I mean? I feel like I live in a society that's still trying to kill me. Like literally, I do. Like doing research, you find out that, you know, the indigenous population never experienced diabetes until they implemented these food programs. They started feeding us processed food. And it's like, that's killing people. It killed my mom. I'm in a life or death battle right now with diabetes. And it's as crazy as it is to say, it's hard to take care of yourself. Like to eat right and all that stuff. And I don't know. And I go back to, and it's silly kind of, as I go back to feeling like this is a problem I wouldn't have had my history and my people's natural ways been stripped from them. Like I wouldn't even be dealing with this. But you know, that's here nor there, I guess. I remember when I was working for AICDC and I was security for the Many Rivers buildings right on Franklin. And right away I was curious to know, like, I know those buildings were built to house like the Native American elder population, but there's barely any Native American elders in there. So I asked the manager, you know, just like why? And his first thing he said is a lot of Native Americans don't qualify for this housing. And the biggest issue is a lot of indigenous people don't even bother to fill out the paperwork because they don't understand it. And I was like, that's an issue, you know, there should be a program where some youngsters that do the paperwork for the elders. Yeah, you know what I mean? And I'm sure there is. I just don't, yeah.
Oh, can you pull up a chair because I'll do this one, yes. I just want to call to attention that this is interactive. We encourage people online to drop comments and people in the audience to be able to get up, ask questions, or say comments.
I work with Little Earth Housing as a housing navigator. I worked with Many Rivers Group. I had a real estate license. And so I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with the elder housing that you're speaking of. And a lot of the folks that we've talked to for the housing in that specific building, they not only don't know how to fill out the paperwork, and that's what we're here for, but they don't want to go there either because of it. It was intended for natives, but it's not native. The population isn't native, and they find that as a barrier. The programs at Little Earth, we had one gentleman who is a elder. He went on the waiting list and he was able to move in there, a brand new, beautiful apartment. No programs for Native American. And most of the people who live there are Somali. No problems with that part of it, except for he found he had no community for what he thought he was moving into. He actually went back on the waiting list at Little Earth, waited 2 years to move out of a brand new apartment to go back to a community that he felt supported, heard, that he had all the resources. And now their waiting list is open and they've been trying to come over to say, hey, and everybody is very reluctant, which is sad and strange. I know that Little Earth is the only housing community in the United States that has real Indian preference. And when you were talking about that it's like a reservation but it's not. Oh, okay, yes, yes. When he said that, and I say the same thing, Little Earth is like a reservation for every tribe member. Because it does have real Indian housing. So their wait list, you could be non-native and go on the wait list, but until every single native before you is tried and true, and it's just proven. I think we have 78% Native Americans that live there.
They have a felony.
That's something that's a challenge there as well. We're also facing evictions. That's another challenge. So felony evictions, we have a lot of evictions going on since the stay was lifted. And many of the evictions that we are facing are family members taking in other family members because they're homeless. And you're faced with that hard decision. Do I let my son as an elder, do I let my son come and live with me? And maybe they have a drug problem or have friends. So we've had people who pay their rent on time actually be evicted in the last few months, which is heartbreaking because now they have an eviction on their record and that stays there for 7 years. I was evicted in my 30s and was homeless for a year, lost my kids. And so we're working on that and I'm familiar, but I haven't worked with Beyond Backgrounds, but I found that. But I just wanted to chime in with that. Many Rivers Group and the housing specifically for elders. My mom is Donna Fairbanks. She's been in Indian housing since the 70s. And she worked for the state of Minnesota for 18 years as the first Indian housing coordinator and the first person in our nation to get funding for home buying education or for home buyers, native home buyers to be able to get a loan, even on a reservation. And she's saying, Kathy, they could get Indian preference at that elders. They just haven't found or fought for it. Because we have it. It's just like it's just like being on a reservation for real Indian preference. And it is a challenge for our natives. We have so many homeless young adults.
Who you have to fight? You say you have to fight for.
Yeah, well, I came across the article in, I think it was early 80s that Little Earth fought because HUD, it's HUD.
So it'd be HUD.
It's HUD you have to fight. We AIM fought for that because they wanted to change it and say, no, you can't have that. That's only on reservations. We want it's open to anybody who qualifies for that wait list and to go and AIM fought for that and they won.
Right.
So it would be looking into the archives of how AIM fought for that with HUD. Because my mom, she's 82, she lives on White Earth Reservation with my dad, who's 86. She said they can get it. They have to fight for it with HUD, but they can get it. So I've only been at Little Earth since January, and I'm a housing navigator, and I hear you and this whole process of paperwork and talking to folks. I don't look native. My father's white. So I have a different experience, but I put on an advocate hat. You want to talk to the IRS? I'm the IRS advocate. If you want to talk to your healthcare and the doctors aren't, I'm your doctor advocate. I'm your housing and I'll speak to anyone I am from the Crane clan. So we're the orators of the tribe. When we see an injustice, we go in. And it's in my blood to do that. So I'm so grateful to be here and that it was to meet you and you and everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I want to thank you because what you are doing is making this a true sense of community. And that's the foundation for what we all need, to be able to chime in with and share knowledge and information with each other to see a bigger picture. I do want to back up a little, and I just want to honor Jermaine, who heard the power in his truth. I mean, we're in the room and we're online. How just beautiful you detailed your truth. I'm just, I think you should be doing more talks and sharing more information because we need more voices like yours to be able to highlight the struggles that exist. And the one thing you said that stuck with me, I feel like the society is still trying to kill me, after you talked about genocide and looking at the statistics, I believe you, looking at who's experiencing chronic illness, overdose, and the prison system, and all of these statistics. The numbers don't lie, so thank you. And I just encourage you to share your voice, I want to tell you, like your story belongs in many places and it can be used to empower people who have similar experiences, but it can also be used as education to people who want to learn how to change things.
Say, follow up on Jermaine's comment too, that how genocide has impacted, and that's what we say in a lot of our communities, intergenerational historical trauma, and most of our BIPOC communities has impacted every decision we made along those social economic lines. And we don't often get to acknowledge that trauma and how it's driven us towards this path, or that path. Who we chose as partners, what kind of education, what kind of job we made. So that intergenerational historical trauma under the umbrella of genocide, can't say genocide enough, has really impacted all of our decision-making skills and choices. And I just wanted to acknowledge that too, when Jermaine said that how important that is for us to recognize, because there's so many of us, if you don't know about genocide, there's so many of us in our own indigenous community don't understand that we have survived a genocide. Our ancestors were hunted and killed and had bounties on our head here in Minnesota. And as Jermaine said, there's still, I was up at Standing Rock and I look at that compared to, remember that standoff in the park, the duck guys, they had the long beards. Do you remember that? It was a state park. And they had guns and they were trying to take the state park back, and they didn't haul out the military and with air guns and water cannons and all of that. They did not. And so when I went to Standing Rock, as soon as I walked into that camp, I felt the love, that Standing Rock, we chose on water is life. How that, as soon as you walk in, man, that feeling of love was there. Everybody, we were all related. They didn't care. We were just human beings trying to save our water. But you stepped out, boy, they had drones going all night. They had guns and they were arresting elders and abusing, putting them in cages. And so when I got back here to Minnesota, I cried. I said, oh my God, they're still trying to kill us. They're still trying to kill us. The government is still trying to kill us. And so those genocide policies still exist. They're still trying to kill us up north with our rice. They're still trying to kill our food system. And so I just want to say, I can't acknowledge that enough. We don't know. So many of our young people, so many of our older people don't know that we have survived a genocide. We're still here. Anytime we eat our food, anytime we speak our language, it's an act of resistance. We're here. We survived. So I think somebody else wanted to say something. Yes. The genocide? Oh, Standing Rock. Okay, you heard about Standing Rock? Oh, Standing Rock was a movement where it started by youth. And LaDonna Harris, I think, but she was from up that way. The pipeline, no, Standing Rock is in South Dakota. And it got international attention because they didn't want that pipeline coming through to take their water. And it gained international attention because it was nonviolent, for one thing. We were nonviolent, but the government was very violent. You know, they were shooting water cannons, arresting old elders, young people, because we were standing up for what we call Mother Earth. You know, so we were standing up for her right. The water is our relative, you know, and that's why I say these frames, our lenses are so different when we've been colonized, when we've been assimilated, when are we still try to stay connected to this place we call home, Earth, you know, the water is our relative, this land, it still gives us energy. We can still heal from it. We're all in this recovery process, but unless we understand that, I know I keep telling the bookkeeper I work with, she, as I talk about, if there's victims, there's perpetrators, and the perpetrators are largely the Europeans. And they too, anytime you commit, as you know, anytime you commit violence, so many of us have, anytime you commit violence, you carry a trauma, whether you acknowledge it or not. And because the Europeans, when they arrived over here, had, you know, there was lots of language, religious persecution, there was lots of land too, all over there. And they came over here and perpetrated that same violence on us as indigenous people, and therefore the genocide happened, and they justified that. And you can tell a lot about people and how they treat their children, how they treat their women, how they treat this place they connect with. If they can abuse this land, they can abuse people. And so there's not enough, when we talked about genocide, there's not enough awareness about that. America has gotten to apologizing to, you know, the Japanese for the internment camps. They've apologized to Black America. They have not apologized to indigenous folks because it involves stolen land, and they're afraid. But, you know, we're not going to send them all back to Europe. We're looking for some accountability here. You know, own up, stop coming into our communities and trying to fix us. Show up as an equal. You're this hierarchy that's been created. We're just all human beings. We're only human beings. We're only the two-leggeds, and we're the youngest of creation. And it's just like, who do we think we are sometimes, you know? We call the ego in some of our stories as a trickster, because we make it all about ourselves, and really we're just human beings here, and we're all related. And that is some of the work I do in the various communities, is to create awareness around genocide that's happened to us, indigenous people. And in our own communities, how empowering that is, but also that there's a parallel trauma that exists. There's perpetrator trauma. And nothing's written about perpetrator trauma outside of the prison system. And it's a doorway to create discussion and dialogue, and to really look for some kind of accountability. And it's not a shaming thing. It's really about, I've come to look at responsibility as another way to show love. We're responsible to each other as human beings. We're responsible to take care of this place, this air we breathe, this water we drink. And it's not a bad thing. And responsibility is another word for love. And it's hard to be responsible sometimes, you know. We live in a system that rewards us for denials. We've been educated under this government, this education system that's been presented a one-sided story. And so how do we begin to flip that script back? Because as Europeans framed it, we were the savages, you know. and yeah, right. So I you know, I'm just, again,
You talk about boarding schools.
and we know about boarding schools, and you know how that, again, you know, that if you look back when boarding schools were beginning, and the motto was kill the Indian, save the child, you know, which, you know, our languages were taken forcibly. But on the parallel, it was bad if you were speaking German, Swedish, whatever your ethnic language might have been. You better only speak English. That was kind of thing. So there's a lot of these parallels. When I talk about parallel trauma, the shame and fear we guilt, the system made us feel as Indigenous people shameful, fearful, guilty that we were Indigenous, that we spoke our language. If they really try to beat that out of us through boarding schools, take the kid away, just like in the slavery, they take the child, that just destroys a person, and so really those disruptions that have happened in our communities. And unless we begin to articulate it, we have more in common than we don't, we're human beings. Unless we begin to articulate those journeys and express them, we don't know what happened to each other then. And the government has tried to divide all brown people, right? Like, let's not tell each other what happened to us, because if they can, the hierarchy, if the government uses I'm better than you with brown people, all brown people, we've been kind of educated that, oh, I'm better than you. No, I am, this whole race wars is just ridiculous. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. You can see right here. And then, so I think as we talk about, the parallel traumas, there's shame and fear and guilt that exist in our counter communities in the white community, where we've seen evidence of that with homelessness when it happened on the Franklin Avenue. Folks would just come in and just throw all kinds of money and top of the line pillows, bedding, sheet, everything, because they could check that I don't have to feel guilty. I did what I could do, and when folks, I know I used to talk about, people would say, what happened to you? And I would say, well, my parents were taken when they were 5 years old. They both spoke Dakota and Lakota, and they were put in boarding schools, and not because they wanted to. If you didn't go to boarding school, your parents my grandparents could have gotten arrested. So they were sent off to boarding school. My dad was tenacious enough to hang on to his language, so he maintained his fluency throughout his life. My mother never spoke Dakota again. She could always understand it, but she would never answer you back in Dakota. She would answer you back in English. And so some of those painful, so people would ask me about like what happened, and they would begin to they'd shut down. They feel guilty, like, oh my God, that wasn't my ancestors. Oh, wasn't my people. We didn't do that. It was, so there was no road for our pathway for accountability, where I think with kind of talking about parallel trauma,
What are some solutions?
right, that's what I'm saying with parallel trauma, it opens the doorway for dialogue to begin to understand. I call it mapping parallel trauma. And so I ask people to look back where they come from, whether it's Europe or wherever they're from, what was happening when these shores were first being colonized and perpetrated on, what was happening. And so to begin to go back to your roots too, because America has disconnected folks from their Scottish ancestry, Norwegian, Swedish, whatever it might be. America tries to disconnect you, and then they want to reward you for that denial with the education system, and they keep you so busy working for a living, right? You hardly have time to stay connected to this place, to stay connected to ceremony and understand that, so I kind of have folks look at, I call it unresolved energy or karma, where people have to go back and so it's a process. And then we kind of maybe create some containers, because that kind of work brings up a lot of, we call it, that incongruence, where people just feel like, oh, so horrible that this happened from the people they come. My ancestors did this. Well, and my one bookkeeper, finance person said, I don't like being called a perpetrator. And I said, I don't like being called a victim. And so, really therein lies, right? Therein lies some of the parallels, right? I don't like being a victim, but really kind of acknowledging where this violence has started and how, this perpetrator,
5% Native American.
yeah. So
It's only 5%.
yeah, and they've kept us very invisible. They want us to be invisible. And so I think with, as we look at housing, as we look at healthcare systems and how we get treated, and Henry, I'm sure Jermaine has too, run the gamut of those stereotypes, they're learned pre-kindergarten, and they learn that from somebody. And unless they're learning that we're all human beings, let's treat each other, with open arms and love, they learn, and because predominantly these positions, doctors and housing folks and housing managers, they're many times they're not people of color. And those barriers, those, that amygdala kicks in, or that vagus nerve triggers, kicks in way faster than what comes out of your mouth. It comes out, your attitudes, your behavior, it shows up in all of that. And unless we begin to have these types of discussions and get this on the table, we're gonna keep, banging our head on the wall. And that's what has happened for the last, as far, I mean, I only got a little bit of housing issues with Henry, and I know this has been going on for a long time, and really trying to connect the dots and understanding how do we change? How do we make impactful changes? And I know we have to go up here to the legislative level. That's what in my purview. So I'll be quiet and let somebody else say something. Okay.
Another way to, give me one second.
People that are
Uh,
color that can help, they can't because we have restrictions and barriers.
Yeah. Another way to frame what you're saying is culture erasure, or the erasing of culture. And that is done by taking away the language, that's done by taking away tradition, and that's done by interrupting the family system. Since we heard from Jermaine, I'm wondering if we can hear from you, from your perspective, from your generation. How have you experienced culture erasure, tradition being lost, language being lost, or interruptions to the family system, as you know?
I've experienced it all. I mean, like, I'm aware that I don't speak my language and I can't speak my language to my peers because it was intentionally taken, it was, basically outlawed. Therefore my great grandparents and grandparents weren't able to teach, because we taught orally, our culture was an oral tradition of teaching. So when they cut that off, like, there's lots of days where I sit back and I'm angry because I think about how much do I not know because of this genocide? How much of my people's medicine will I never get to learn? Because it was intentionally taken from us. And I think I know I carry the pain of my ancestors. Like, I know I do. I feel it. And I'm angry about it. Like, it doesn't make sense to me that a group of people can come over here and call themselves civilized, but act uncivilized against people that they call savages, but are savagely harming these people when they were welcome with an outstretched hand. And they only seen a means to exploit, and to rape people of their resources, although we didn't look at it like that, But it's ridiculous to me that there's a homeless Native American anywhere in this country. Like, how is that possible?
Mhm.
How are we the first people to be here? And you take my cell phone and sell it back to me. You know what I mean? Like, so you took my house from me and then said, you need to work hard to get it back. Like, it doesn't make any sense to me. And it angers me. It's just like no amount of money could fill that void of feeling. It for myself, it sucks that I know that I have to work so hard to get my language back, to work even harder to pass it on to the generation below me. But I know it has to happen, and if I don't do something with it, then I'm just as bad as the person that took it. You know what I mean? It's like, I feel like it's a responsibility. Sometimes it feels very burdensome. It feels like a huge burden because I'm aware of these issues. You know, and it's like drug addiction is, I've never seen it hit my people the way it's hit my people in the last 10 years.
Mhm.
I've buried so many loved ones, like a ridiculous amount.
Mhm. Mhm.
And and I feel like the only way to break that cycle is we got to start having a dialogue with the kids. Like the people that are out here addicted now, they're gonna have to make their own choice, you know? And that's gonna take, you know, speaking with other people, seeing other people get out of it and do something better, to give them something to be prideful about. Because they feel pain too, that's why they're using drugs. You know, that's how they cope with their pain. And some of them haven't even identified it yet. And it could be genocide. It could be all the despair that they see within the community. No jobs, you know, everybody's at the food shelf, you know, it's like all of that stuff is heavy, you know, and it, like I've recently experienced depression at a level I've never experienced it. And it, when I looked at myself being that low, I thought about, I can see how so many other Native people get to that point. Why we're at the top of this list of suicide. How you can get to that point where you feel like you have no hope, no nothing. You know, because it does feel hopeless sometimes. If you're living in a community where you gotta scratch to survive. And I grew up with it all my life, you know what I mean? You had to go to food shelves, you know, I had to go to places to get money for rent, to help pay the rent. You know, I turned to a life of crime to pay the bills because I didn't think I could get a job. So it's just, I mean, it's a big battle, but I feel like us younger people are starting to be up for it now.
Mm. So thank you. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think that most, if not all of us can agree that there's harmful systems in place that are not helping at all. On the other side of that, there are some people who want to help. And in my experience, I see and watch people respond to in help and in support to their understanding. We all inherit a view of the world, and it's this is how you help people. But help and support is not a one size fits all tool. And so my question to you is, in your experience and in the knowledge that you hold, what can people do to be helpful and supportive to your understanding?
I guess I don't really know how to answer that question.
And that's
I
okay.
almost feel like, I'm sorry, I almost feel like, you know, the programs and systems that are in place now, I think an honest change in the guard, a changing of the guard would make a lot of sense, man, to get some younger, open-minded people in place. Because there's some, you know, sometimes there's old bosses that have been in a situation that see things a certain way and just rock it like that, you know, like this is how we're gonna do it and that's it. But I don't really understand the systems well enough to understand like what could be put in place. Like I would have to do some research and really understand the inner workings of things before I could honestly answer that question. Where I would feel confident in what I'm saying, even making sense to this, you know, to that situation.
And I appreciate that answer, because when you're in a problem, it's hard to see it from the outside. And when you've experienced so many disparities, it's hard to see what the solution is. Yeah.
You made your first step today, so.
Yeah.
This will be the first step.
But I think it's something that we should all entertain. What are ways that people can respond and help and in support? And once we sit with that, once we talk with that, you know, be it with community, be it with elders, then we can advocate for that. And so those are the steps, and to be around like-minded people who want to be able to push for it, because, you know, with just like everything, it takes a little bit of all of us, you know. It takes our community, but it takes people outside of our community to be able to strengthen what we're pushing for. And, you know, whatever it is, you know, I don't know it either. That was a very honest answer. I'm not sure what it is either. Otherwise, I could be advocating for it on the platforms that I'm able to use. I want to take this back to kind of not where we started with genocide, but where we started with Henry. And I want to use this opportunity and this time for each of our guest speakers, starting with Tanya. Tanya, I'm coming to you next, but to be able to share one memory of Henry. If you could sum up who he was, or a memory, a favorite interaction, at your leisure. Tanya, I'm going to pass the speaking rights over to you.
I was thinking of even the way I met Henry, you know. It was a little bit difficult trying to make that connection with Henry. So I actually met Jewel first. And then we were able to, you know, kind of kick off our meeting, things like that. And just thinking about, you know, what Henry wanted, and that goal was always find housing. He didn't want anything else but housing. And sometimes I would be frustrated because I'm like, I can't find anything. I've looked, and you know, there were sleepless nights. Absolutely. I could not sleep because I would always wonder what would happen to Henry. When are we going to find this? As you know, we developed that relationship. I never, I would say, took Henry for granted. I always tried to meet Henry where he was. He's an individual, and you meet people where they are. There is no one size fit all. You meet people where they are. And if Henry decided he wanted independent housing, that was the job that I had to do. It wasn't bringing in what I wanted for him. I just wanted him to have something, and it could have been anything, but he wanted what he wanted, and I had to honor that. And so I've learned in working with people, you meet them where they are and you help them with what they want. I remember the times I would have to lift the wheelchair in and out of the car. Sometimes it would be like Henry wanted to, he did smoke cigarettes, and he wanted to smoke. And so I'm not a smoker, and I would say he would want to smoke, and I'm like, man, I mean, I even had to go buy the cigarettes, and it was because I had already taken the wheelchair out, and we went to a doctor's appointment, came back, and he was like, all right, stop over here so I can get some cigarettes. And then, you know, I knew that if I didn't go buy the cigarettes, then I would have to take the wheelchair out again. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't want to take the wheelchair out again. I'm not going to take it out. So then I'm like, all right, give me your stuff so I can go buy the cigarettes. So I would go buy the cigarettes for him. And then he actually wanted to smoke them in the car. And I'm like, my husband and my son is going to be wondering, why do your car smell like smoke? I'm like, Henry, I mean, it's freezing outside. We on the highway, his hands sticking out the window, and we got the windows down, so my car doesn't smell like smoke. And I'm like, man, Henry, don't get me in trouble. So I would see myself, you know, we just had a different relationship, so that I could fuss at him and still respect him, to honor his choices and things like that, and just be like, man. So then, you know, he was able to smoke a couple more times in the car. You know, he's the only person I ever let smoke in my car. So he definitely was special to me, you know, being that he was He wasn't the first person we found housing for, but all of this hard work was channeled into a business. So I have to give Henry that honor, because if it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be where I am today, and I wouldn't have the passion. I actually worked in government for about 23 years before I started my own business. And so the passion of homelessness, I mean, it's there. It's there, it's alive. It's in every county, regardless if people say it's not in our backyard. It is there if you go look for it. If you're not looking for it, you won't find it. And that's oftentimes, you won't find something you're not looking for. But if you're looking for it, you'll find it. And, I considered myself a resourceful person. So even if I don't have the answer, I need to go look for it and circle back and come back to you to help you out. So I try to be a resource to help people and things like that. But yeah, Henry,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
all of his thousands of nieces and nephews. Yeah, he had a lot of nieces and nephews, and I'm like, okay, how many nieces and nephews do he really have? But
Well,
lots,
if you
lots.
watch the video, he says he was uncle to everyone.
I know, everybody.
So, I really appreciate that. And if you were here in person, you could see everybody laughing and smiling. And that was a great way to honor Henry. So thank you, Tanya. I appreciate you. I'm going to turn it over to Jermaine. What is your favorite Henry memory? You can say anything you want, except for anything incriminating. We're gonna leave that off the table.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I have so many stories of me and bro, man. We spent a lot of time on the road and stuff. Drive and just spent a lot of time together, man. We were really close. And just my best memory is, no matter what, I can always call him, man, and we can chop it up and laugh and have a good time for hours on the phone, you know what I mean? Or whatever. Like, we were there for each other like that. He was there for me a lot like that, Yeah, like he inspires me, because he lost his ability to walk. I know he didn't show me a lot of times when he felt like giving up. I seen the fact that he stayed with it to the end. He didn't allow it to hinder him from living life as best as he could. And that was inspiring, because I know, to be able to lose the ability to walk, to be handicapped like that in just a split second from a ridiculous decision, takes a lot of strength. And that always inspired me. So that's probably my biggest, that's probably my best memory, is that he was able to carry on.
Inspirational from the video as well. I never got to meet Henry in person, but to be able to want to create pimp out wheelchairs, or to create custom wheelchairs, for people, who that's how they can become mobile. I mean, just a beautiful heart. Thank you for sharing, Jermaine. Jewel, I don't want to assume, I want to ask you if you would feel comfortable sharing about your son. Okay, I'm gonna.
Okay, I see some of Henry's doctors here, Susan and Selma, and I'd like to thank them for listening to Henry, because that's what it takes. And Tanya, and Jermaine, listening, opening up to Henry and allowing him to express himself and be himself, and everybody knew Henry. I think what I cherish the most is Henry's sense of humor. And in spite of the hard times and the pain, he could still make somebody else laugh, hilariously laugh. You know, see the comic or the humor in a situation. And, and I know they say that people who are able to have that ability are very spiritual people, spiritual beings, because they can smile and laugh through this pain, incredible pain. And that's something I miss and cherish at the same time is, it's conversation, but how he could see a situation and find the humor in it, so, yeah, I'd say that. Thank you for asking. I think they said I should have had him in a gifted intelligent program. He's always very smart, intelligent, disruptive in class. And so looking back, I can see how those, the historical trauma impacted my decisions and parenting and all of those things, partner choices. But as a kid, Henry was he was a joy to have. He always had a big heart though. He'd give you his last dollar to buy you some food or chip in or something. So he's always kind of a person that believed in this collectiveness of our community and, really loved our people. And he was just a smart kid, I mean, I remember we took him up to the Black Hills and he wasn't even 10 years old. And he said, I don't know why we don't blow that place up. I said, what? How could you say that? So, I mean, that just gives you a little inkling into where Henry's frame of thinking, came from. But yeah.
Thank you very much, Jewel. And to bring it back, homeless in our homeland, crisis in the Native American community. It really needs to be addressed, and it takes all of us. And a lot of times people wonder, what can I do? I'm only one person. I just want to tell people that one person can change the world, and don't let your one-ism stop you, because you can be a collective with other one-isms to form something that changes the system. And when people ask, what can I do? I'm only fill in the blank. We all have skills. We all have talents. We can dedicate our time. We can dedicate our energy, and we can dedicate our effort into using those skills and talents to help out those communities that are at the greatest risk. If you're great at building resumes, connect with an organization from the Native American community that says, I have 3 hours a week. How can I best use this time? If you're great with your hands and repairing, that's a skill, that's a talent. Connect with a community organization that can reach out people and at least offer that. I think we all have 3 hours a week to be able to give to something that's bigger and better than ourselves. And if we apply ourselves, we can change the world that we know. Is there anything that you would like to leave us with?
We've got to create an awareness of these challenges that our BIPOC communities are facing. Homeless in our homeland is, otherwise we are, like I said, we're banging our head on the wall. There's got to be some changes at the top. And I'm looking at research and statistics and pulling those like crazy. And I understand statistics enough to know that somebody up here are making these laws so that these particular folks can get housing and these over here cannot. And so I would say keep continuing to create those awarenesses within yourself. Look at statistics and how do we get a hold of our legislative people to begin to collectively dialogue and say, we can't take this anymore. It's got to change.
Tanya, as we think about closing out, I want to turn the microphone over to you and just be able to give us some closing thoughts from your perspective.
All right, well, thank you for having me today. And the fight continues. We continue helping people. We accept, anybody who's looking for housing. In the chat feature, I did add the name. I added some housing stabilization service, which is a service. I just want people who need help to get the help. So sometimes it'll be doctors who will need to do a professional statement of need. And then we can do the housing focused person-centered plan with the client. And then we're just making those calls, doing the research, looking. We help people fill out the paperwork, things like that. Because we know if you can have housing, people have money, but if you have the money, but you still don't have the housing, it doesn't really help. And we know housing is so important. It gives you that stability that, you know, you don't have it when you're out on the streets. You don't have it for your children. I mean, we think of children, we think of individuals, elders. I mean, my youngest client was 18 and my oldest client was 81. Because seniors need housing too. Everybody needs that housing. And we serve all populations. So we have some Somali speakers, we have Spanish speakers at the office. We've made sure to be a diverse company. I was even thinking we have, and I still count Henry as, you know, current, even if he's not with us physically, he's still with us spiritually, he's there. So we do have some Native American clients. We have about 5 Native American clients that we are helping right now. So this service, like I said, is beyond just finding the housing, it's sustaining, because the goal is never to be homeless again. So with housing stabilization services, it is all throughout the state of Minnesota. So if you know someone that's looking for housing, they need resources, they can always get connected. We don't have to have the client ourselves. We're willing to share, because there's so many people. There's so many people that need housing. There's no way one company can tackle this. It takes the whole village helping to find the housing. So we're willing to help out. Thank you for having me today. And Jewel, you know, when I'm actually out of town right now, but when I'm back, I'll come for my hug.
Thank you very much. And feel free to put your business and contact information in the chat if you haven't done so already. And I want to, you know, thank everybody, Tanya and Jewel. And Jewel, thank you for bringing Jermaine. Jermaine, you brought a great perspective to this conversation and highlighted a lot of issues from a first perspective, as somebody who has lived that as well, and you have a knowledge system that can truly be helpful. In any closing words, I want to turn it over to you to close this out. So anything that's on your heart, anything that's on your mind, anything that you want people to know as we leave, please feel free to do so.
I just think that we should start seeing that this is an issue, you know, homeless Native Americans in our homeland. You know, it's not right that this shouldn't be an issue, and that people should take a good long hard look at it and understand. And I feel like it's not a money issue, because we got trillionaires out here. It shouldn't be a problem. It shouldn't be an issue that we're having. And people just need to come together. People that have the means or the power to really make some definite changes need to step up and take on the responsibility that they should be, you know, to do something about it. Because all of us here on the ground level, I guess, lack of a better term, we can rant and rave all we want, but if the people that have the power and the resources to make something happen, if they ignore it, nothing's gonna change. And if that happens, we know that that's purposeful. It's deliberate. And at that point, I don't know what to do at that point, except for demand some changes. And changing in the guard, I think, on all government levels. I don't understand how the American public's not, how everybody's not angry. And these legislators can do whatever they want, get away with all kinds of depravity, and we sweep it under the rug like, oh, that's messed up, and keep it moving. Yeah, I think that's a big issue. The people that make the laws in this country aren't good people. I think just plain and simple and really good people. And I'm sure there's some, I can't, generalize that statement, but I think the lawmakers, we need to start taking a bigger look at who we're putting in charge to speak for us. Because we put a lot of focus on the presidency, and it's not that important. It's the people in Congress, on the state level and the federal level. We need to start paying attention to those people and what kind of people they are. Are they really fit to speak for us? Are they just there to speak for themselves? A lot of these issues may go away if we have people there that are speaking for us, that make the decisions based on what is going to be good for our kids in the long run, Those decisions matter.
Thank you very much for sharing that, Jermaine. And Jewel, Tanya, Jermaine, thank you all for being here. On behalf of Minnesota Second Chance Coalition, we truly thank you. As somebody who has built a relationship with you, Jewel, I thank you from the bottom of my heart for taking your wisdom, experience, and knowledge and being able to share it with this crowd. As much as Homeless in Our Homeland is detailing the experience of the Native American and Indigenous community, it's also this story, this presentation, it's also a call to action. It's a call for people to use their resources, their skills, their talents, their professional platform to be able to take into consideration what is happening out in the world and to bring some restorative justice and bring some culturally appropriate approaches back to the people that need it the most through the system. So if that applies to you, whatever platform that you work on, whether you feel it's big or whether you feel it's small, this is a call to action for all of us, because it'll take all of us to truly make changes. Thank you all in the audience, and thank you to the speakers. We appreciate you. Thank you.
May I ask quickly, where will the recording be available from?
We are going to put this on our website, and it'll be available then.
All right, a Minnesota Second Chance. Okay.
Thank you all very much. Bye now.